This is the World Nomad Games archery competition. Archers step up, bowstrings taut, aiming for targets the size of a small dinner plate. And when the round ends, they got to fetch their own arrows. Watching a parade of vibrant outfits cross the field, now that's something you don't expect to see at an archery event. It's kind of like a catwalk decided to crash the competition. Here, the traditional clothing really stands out, especially in a world where most of us wear the same brands like Gap and Uniqlo. What really struck me was seeing athletes from places like Australia and the UK proudly dressed in the traditional clothing of their ancestors. Competing for their current national teams, they still honored the cultures that shaped them. This blend of heritage and identity added real depth to the event, showing that who we are isn't just about where we live. It's also about the traditions that we carry within us. Archery has deep roots in nomadic cultures where it was a cornerstone of traditional warrior training. But here, it's also a showcase of the different styles of traditional archery from around the world. An homage to the bow and arrow as an integral part of human history and development. Now let's take it up a notch. Archery on the back of a speeding horse. In this competition, riders tear down a narrow path, firing at 3 targets as they go. And the usual powerhouses are here: Mongolia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan. But China, Saudi Arabia, the US, and Iran are here too, each with riders hungry to prove themselves. And here's something today that we completely take for granted: how a rider can steer a horse without touching the reins. Hands-free. Stirrups. They were invented sometime around the 4th century in China and India, and they changed everything. When you have your feet secured, you can pull off complex maneuvers, keep your balance, and have both hands free for a bow, a sword, or whatever it took. Suddenly, mounted warriors weren't just moving targets, but a deadly force, fast and adaptable. I gotta be honest with you, whenever I see Olympic dressage, it feels more like a dance for the privileged than a raw test of horsemanship. But horseback archery? That I can get behind. Beyond horseback archery, there are 19 other events. Too many to dive into here, but they're all incredibly unique representations of nomad culture. You have Powerful Nomad, a strongman competition in which competitors compete to lift 100-kilo bags and pull 200-kilo carts. Then you have Moss Wrestling. Think tug of war, but sitting down. 2 people lock their feet against a board and try to yank a stick from each other's grip, each one trying to deadlift the other over. Brutal, but insanely entertaining. Next we have Asyk, knucklebone shooting. Think back to marbles, but now picture sheep knucklebones instead. You can't get more nomad than that. You flick a weighted knucklebone, trying to scatter the others. It's a game every kid in Central Asia grows up with, but few will ever see the game played on this level. But if there's a main event at this year's World Nomad Games, it's gotta be Kokpar. The rules? Pretty simple. 2 teams of riders clash on horseback to score. The catch? It's not a ball they're taking to the end zone. It's a 50-pound goat carcass. Or traditionally there was. This year, it's a synthetic goat, probably sparking 1,000 debates in Kazakh bars about whether Kokpar's gone soft. First match we wanted to see, Kazakhstan versus the USA. Yes, you heard right. The United States has a Kokpar team. The United States Kokpar team represents one of those only in America surprises, training stateside to take on a game that's more tradition than sport in this part of the world. Affectionately called the Cowboys by Kazakh media, they've come ready to go toe-to-toe with the Kazakhs for a chance to make a mark in a sport as old as the steppe itself. Honestly, we thought they were going to get destroyed. So in the opening minutes, when the US team scored, we were shocked. But when we looked around and we realized the crowd as well as the Kazakh players didn't even bat an eye, we realized Kazakhstan might have been playing easy on them, because they quickly showed the Cowboys who owns the steppe. Final score, Kazakhstan 12, USA 4. It was a pretty clear signal. The locals call the shots. But to give the Cowboys credit, they put up a good fight, despite having it twice as hard as the other teams. They double as the kok-boru team, which is really similar to Kokpar, but Kyrgyzstan's version of it. Kokpar? Kok-boru? What's the difference? Depends on who you ask. For the Kazakhs, it's all Kokpar, but to the Kyrgyz, the goal isn't a line, but a massive cauldron you got to heave the goat into. Goat basketball. Go further south, and the sport becomes buskashi in Afghanistan and Tajikistan. But what are the roots of the game? Let me tell you a story from a few years ago. I was in western China, in the Tian Shan mountain range, as far from modern civilization as it gets. I was staying with a traditional Kyrgyz nomadic family, and as the night crept in, the temperatures dipped and the noises began. Restless sheep, the bark of dogs every hour on the hour. My host grabbed his coat and a long pole and stepped out into the dark. Gradually, the sounds died down and I fell asleep again. Next morning over breakfast, I learned what all the restless energy was about. Wolves. In nomadic life, a wolf isn't just an annoyance. It's a threat to everything you own. When your net worth is your flock, you protect it with everything you've got. And this is where Kokpar comes in. Legend has it that centuries ago, after killing a wolf, a herdsman would carry it back to camp as a trophy. It wasn't long before this became a contest to see who could snatch the carcass and race it home. Now, wolf carcasses don't exactly grow on trees, but goats? Plenty. Some believe Kokpar evolved beyond mere competition and became a form of military training. Historians have found records of games like Kokpar as early as the 10th century. The physical demands of Kokpar, the grappling, maneuvering, are all honed skills for the battlefield. So when we watch Kokpar today, we're not just watching a game. We're watching something rooted in a world that doesn't quite exist anymore. So you can imagine what was at stake when the final showdown featured Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. History, pride, and grit all rolled into one blistering match. Two giants of the steppe facing off. On one side, the Kazakhs, undisputed legends with a home field advantage. On the other, the Kyrgyz, just as fierce, with a style and strategy all their own, driven by the independent spirit of kok-boru. The day of the match, the stands were full. Standing room only. Both teams knew there was more at stake than just a win. This is about proving who really owns Kokpar. And here at the Nomad Games, Kokpar is everything. Up next, the grand finale. You don't want to miss it. So here's the deal. A like, a subscribe, it's just a flick of the thumb for you. But for me, it's a signal that this kind of storytelling matters to someone else out there. So if you're into it, you know what to do. Stick around for more stories from the road.